Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. That's right, it's not a special edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. It's just a regular edition of the Steel City Underground podcast, but I still have news to cover with you, and a little bit of that just in 1 second. I just want to say my normal shout out to all my listeners that I usually save this for the end of my podcast, but I want to catch you right up front. I love you guys and gals that are out there on social media, on YouTube, leaving me some reviews, leaving me all the positive comments, and sharing this with all of your friends, family, and the rest of Steelers Nation. I truly do appreciate you. After all, what else is there that drives us except for our love and passion for the Pittsburgh Steelers? And that's what the Steel City Underground is all about. That's how I come up with the name. And if you take a look, like even just the logo, the idea behind this, the whole concept, it's the bridges of Pittsburgh, and even incorporating part of a little bit of an alteration of the crest of the city of Pittsburgh that's on that flag. So, I mean, this is a movement. It's about all of us who have maybe a little bit more knowledge or seek a little bit more knowledge as fans, and think about this in a whole different way, because we could all parrot statistics all day long. We can all talk about the same things, but that's not what this is about. This is getting underneath, and that's kind of where I'm at today. This is my topic for today. This is the moves the Steelers didn't make, and I'm going to talk about two of the moves they didn't make in the draft, and some of the pre-draft visitors and the pro days, some of the guys that they looked at, and it wasn't just a matter of another team taking a player. So you have, like, I think Tavon Young was one of the defensive backs that the Steelers looked at, and he ended up going with the Baltimore Ravens. And okay, that player's off the board. Cool. You know, Carl Joseph gets drafted somewhere in the middle of the first round ahead of the Steelers, goes to the Oakland Raiders, or the Atlanta Falcons taking Keanu Neal, another safety from Florida. Those type of things are those are expected. Those are things that you can't prevent. The Steelers can't prevent. It's out of their control, out of our control. You know what I mean? But there were two guys in particular that didn't go where we thought they were going to go. And one of them was, and I feel, I feel incredibly I feel stupid, but given that I didn't have all of the information, and most of the draft experts and even the guys in the panel who had Andrew Billings going with pick number 25 overall, the Steelers' first pick, first round selection, that was our guess. And now we're finding out that this guy's knee is he's got a knee cartilage problem. And you know what? I'm not even sure this guy's going to have an NFL career. He could go under the knife and be out for a year. I mean, remember what happened when we took Sean Spence and he got hurt in the preseason? It took him 2 years to recover. I mean, we really don't know where this Andrew Billings is at now. Cincinnati Bengals, I feel, as much as I dislike other teams in the AFC North, I love the NFL in general. So let's talk about that for a second. The Cincinnati Bengals either got an incredible steal with Andrew Billings, selecting him in the 4th round right before the Steelers pick. I really wonder what happens if Andrew Billings is still there. I still think Kevin Colbert and company pass on Billings. I don't know. A young player coming out, and a lot of people felt that maybe he could only play 2 downs. He was strictly a nose tackle. Just all of this advice and all the draft gurus and analysts and experts and everybody that we rely on for our information, aside from our own eyes and our own thoughts. We can't watch every college football team that's out there. Most of you never even heard of South Carolina State until Javon Hargrave gets picked with the 3rd round pick, right? So how can you be so wrong? I don't know. It's just some of this information. I mean, you look at what happened with Laramie Tunsil, and that happens on his Twitter account with the gas mask and stuff, and he falls dramatically. I mean, this is information at your fingertips, right there, and nobody had this, and Andrew Billings just falls off a cliff, and the Steelers don't make the move on that, and that can either come back to bite him very bad or come out to be a very wise choice. If he never ends up playing a single down for the Cincinnati Bengals, they'll end up proving everybody right by not taking him. But how about a player who went undrafted entirely entirely, what was it, ACC Defensive or Co-Defensive Player of the Year safety Jeremy Cash from Duke University. Here's a guy that's, some people had him as high as round 2. I know there was chatter and, some people are just fans and they don't really know the draft grades and they are even thinking first round maybe with the Steelers. But I think most of the experts had this guy on day 2, rounds 2 and 3, and he goes completely undrafted, unselected by 32 NFL teams who felt the film on this guy, the tape on him, was not good enough to even merit a selection, a draft pick in the NFL draft. 250 some odd picks, right? That blew my mind. And I thought even maybe the Steelers would look at him as an undrafted free agent. They probably did. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors. He ends up staying over there in the Carolinas. He's now a member of the Carolina Panthers, at least tentatively for now. That's where he signed his undrafted or college free agent contract. So we'll see. That's probably a good landing spot to see. You never know. These guys prove people wrong all the time. What was it? Chris Harris, one of the top cornerbacks that plays for the Denver Broncos, undrafted. You have a lot of examples like that. And I just wanted to point out those 2 players were guys that the Steelers passed on. We'll see what ends up happening. Maybe nothing. There are hundreds of names like this that happen every year. And there's guys that end up in camps. And there's guys that make it and they don't make it. And they're an afterthought. So very interesting. But one move the Steelers did make, or I should say, one move that happened that the Steelers didn't make that led to another move that did happen. Does that sound a little confusing? I'm sorry if it does. And I'm also, this is a good time to bring this up too. I had I wanted to say like a user, a listener that's over on YouTube user, and left me a comment, and I may have gotten a statistic wrong. And you know what, guys, I do appreciate that, because sometimes, you know what happens, I have a list of notes here. I don't have this multi-million-dollar recording studio that I'm working out of. I'm a fan just like you that's producing, above level amateur professional quality podcast here, something for you to listen to on demand. And every now and then, either putting stuff into my little agenda or program notes that I want to go over today, I could either have a typo or, I'm just out of my mind. I lose it. I get too excited and maybe I just say the wrong thing. So if I ever mislead you, feel free to tell me. I really don't get offended. And then sometimes I'm just like, where and when did I say that? Well, I apologize. It happens. And I'm more specifically talking about Javon Hargrave, the nose tackle, or defensive lineman, defensive tackle, defensive end. That guy's going to play everywhere. I'm very excited about him. But it was something, I don't know if it was about his career sacks or if I screwed up one of his years in school, junior or senior year or whatever, with how many sacks he had in that year. But he did have 37.5 career sacks as validated by Associated Press and also by ESPN. Not really the South Carolina State website. The bios they have on there, they didn't really have the career stats. They just had what he had for the previous year. He had 16 sacks, pretty much led the nation as a nose tackle. Still a beast. I didn't mean to talk about Hargrave, but I am excited about him. You could tell. The move I did want to talk about was the Pittsburgh Steelers do not take, or I don't know, they're really in the running. A little lukewarm. I got excited. I wanted us to take Brian Hoyer, okay? Brian Hoyer is now going to be a Chicago Bear. Great move for the Chicago Bears, okay, because you see what happens with backup quarterbacks. And last year, Chicago Bears, a class example of Jake Cutler goes down, and they're pulling bodies from wherever they could get them. That team with Jimmy Clausen, even with Matt Forte and Alshon Jeffrey, and Martellus Bennett at a tight end. And it sounds a lot like the Steelers crew of guys that they have, right? Like a Ladarius Green and Antonio Brown or Martavis Bryant, Le'Veon Bell, D'Angelo Williams. Yeah, okay, you got some explosive players, but man, I remember watching a game in the middle of the NFL season, and Jimmy Clausen is their backup quarterback filling in for Jay Cutler. And Jimmy Clausen, couldn't do anything. I almost felt like, and I'm not going to say I could, but man, Jimmy Clausen, geez, what happened to that guy? He comes out of Notre Dame, and he's a big name on draft day, and we're talking about the draft. And I'm going to dovetail here a little bit off in a little sidebar. And I remember the Carolina Panthers, I want to say Jimmy Clausen falls out of the first round completely. I hope I'm not getting this wrong. I think it was the 2010 draft that I was watching or rewatching leading up to this weekend's draft activities. NFL Network was replaying all of them. And it's funny to rewatch all this stuff and see all the talking heads and all the experts, and they talk, and Jimmy Clausen falls from day one. Oh my God, And I think the Panthers I think they didn't have a first round pick, or they traded out of the first round pick. But either way, Jimmy Clausen was their top pick for that year. And we see how that turned out, because in 2011, they get the top pick overall, period. And they said, yeah, nope, this was a mistake. Cam Newton. And they take Cam Newton, and now see where they are. They were in the Super Bowl. So Jimmy Clausen, he ends up being a Chicago Bear, and he ends up being a backup. And that was just a really bad situation. I wouldn't even say Clausen got hurt, and I can't remember the name of who else was there. I keep thinking of Josh McCown, but Josh McCown's with the Cleveland Browns the last couple of seasons. So McCown's a good case study, because when the Bears were in trouble and Cutler gets hurt, and you have McCown come in, and look what he did. He earned himself some starting gigs. One really bad one with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a year. And then he put up some pretty big numbers that the Browns hadn't seen for years, throwing the guys like Brian Hartline and Taylor Gabriel and Travis Benjamin, and he made Gary Barnidge into a Pro Bowl tight end up there in Cleveland. And yeah, that's pretty. So what I'm getting at is the backup quarterback situation. So Hoyer goes there, and Hoyer, maybe a good situation, or maybe the end of the career for Hoyer, because if and when Cutler gets hurt and Hoyer has to come in, he's going to have to pretty much do things by himself. So we'll see how that turns out. But the main important thing is that Hoyer's no longer a free agent, and the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't draft a quarterback. And I didn't think they would draft a quarterback. I've been on just on a roll, just slamming my fist on the table saying, don't take a quarterback this year. I don't know if a quarterback was on the table. They didn't visit with any. They may have seen some in the pro days when they were going and looking at other players, scouting other players at those various pro days. Definitely Ohio State would be a good example. They're there. They're looking at like Von Bell, Eli Apple, but Braxton Miller's working out there, converted quarterback. Cardell Jones, obviously, quarterback. So he wins a national championship. 3 of the biggest games that I think any college player will ever have in their career, by the way. What a Cinderella story that is. And now that kid's got himself a shot at playing in the NFL, too. Pretty cool. But I didn't think the Steelers, a lot of people thought Cardell Jones was like a guy that the Steelers would look at. That he does. He reminds you of Big Ben and big body. And yeah, but maybe not as polished coming out of college. Definitely not the body of work that Roethlisberger had in Miami. But then again, some people, Carson Wentz coming out of a smaller school, or Ben coming out of Miami of Ohio, a MAC school, and you're kind of like, well, will they be able to live up to the task in the NFL? And I don't know. I really don't know. But it gets to the point of a backup quarterback. And I didn't think the Steelers would draft one, because it would turn into the Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler situation in Denver. You'll have, in several years, you take a quarterback now, and in several years, when that backup quarterback that you drafted, his contract is ready to expire, and you have to make a decision on whether or not to keep Ben Roethlisberger, who will be approaching age 40, maybe towards the end of his career. We don't know how that'll play out. I don't have a crystal ball or a DeLorean in order to go and check out the sports almanac and see if Ben Roethlisberger is still playing to an elite level several years from now, or still healthy. But just a hypothetical, you have this situation happen with Manning, who is on the end of his career, one of his worst statistical season of any Super Bowl starting quarterback ever. And Brock Osweiler gets to go in there for a few games and does all right. Wins some games for the Broncos, keeps them in contention, makes way for Manning to come back in, gets hurt, whatever. So then Manning's out there, and he carries the torch, leads the team to a Super Bowl championship. And now you have a free agent, and you have the incumbent, an all-time great, future Hall of Famer. You just won the Super Bowl, and what are you going to do with them? Are you going to nudge him towards retirement? I mean, that just happened with Troy Polamalu, right? There was a big stink over that. Remember Brett Favre? when the Packers, and Brett Favre was 3 years older than Big Ben at that time. So I don't think the Steelers were quite ready to draft a quarterback, and I was right. We kind of had a prelude to this about 1 week ago when Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert sat down and had their pre-draft press conference. And someone in attendance had asked, how's Bruce's arm? Referring to Bruce Gradkowski, who was penciled in as the number 2 or backup quarterback, hurt his shoulder in the preseason. He barely got to play in the preseason. I think he was featured in one game. They thought he was healthy, and he didn't end up being healthy. He gets placed on injured reserve. In comes Michael Vick. And then you have Landry Jones, of course. So we knew Landry Jones would be there this year. And Landry, most of us, let me say this. I was teasing all of you because I was at the Steelers fan blitz over the weekend. And I saw, if you hadn't seen this over on Facebook or Twitter, it posted a picture with game-worn authentic merchandise. And I was just cracking up because my cousin's always busting my chops over Landry Jones because I won't stick a fork in the guy, and I don't stick a fork in any of our players. That's just not the way I am. I try to remain upbeat and positive, and glass. I asked somebody on Twitter about Bruce Gradkowski, but glass half empty or glass half full, and I'm always glass half full guy. Okay, and the cups aren't going to overflow with maybe our defense at will now, but when it comes to a quarterback, I don't think we're quite there yet, but. Landry Jones merchandise, $900 for an authentic NFL jersey, game worn by Landry Jones. It was our white away jersey. It was in pristine condition. Doesn't look like it had a single dirt mark or anything on it. And I'm just like, wow, what game did he wear this for? If he wore it at all, right? So it was really clean. They could have used it for a Tide commercial. So that fired up the Steelers Nation. Half of everybody says, oh, Landry Jones is a bum, and the other half is, hey, leave him alone. He had, as I said, 5 good drives against Arizona. 4 of them result in a score, 2 touchdowns, 2 field goals. The 5th drive that wasn't a score was the victory formation. So leave the guy alone. We won an important game that got us in the playoffs. And he technically got on the stat sheet, too, with another win against Cleveland, even though he let him down the field and then gets hurt, and Roethlisberger comes in as a backup quarterback. One of the funniest stories. You'll be able to tell that to your kids or grandkids someday. One of the funniest stories in Steelers lore. So getting back to Bruce G. and Tomlin and Colbert's pre-draft press conference, and somebody asked him how his shoulder is, and, they said, hey, we worked him out. He looked pretty good throwing, very confident in him, blah, blah, blah. All of that to me was, if a quarterback that we don't like doesn't fall to us in a draft, Bruce is going to be signed right after. And what do you know? On Sunday and Monday, it's official. Bruce Gradkowski coming back on a 1-year deal, and that's not too bad. But Bruce hasn't, he's thrown 3 passes as a Steelers, 2 for 3 in the 2014 season playoff game. That was actually played in January 2015. Steelers won the AFC North, hosted the Baltimore Ravens. They didn't have Le'Veon Bell. Ben gets hurt down by the end zone. Gradkowski actually makes a very clutch throw and gets a first down on a 3rd and long. So that's about the most that I've been able to see of Gradkowski other than some preseason action. To be honest with you guys, he's only thrown 32 passes since 2011. But for whatever reason, they do feel comfortable with him. It looks like he knows the system. It would have been very interesting to see what would have happened if Bruce G. had done the same or gotten the same opportunity as Landry Jones did this year. So Landry Jones is a guy who has actually thrown more passes and has maybe about the same or better completion percentage as Bruce Gradkowski. You kind of have 2 guys that are almost in the same ballpark there, one a little older than the other. Very interesting to see how this is going to turn out, if one is going to hold the clipboard or whatever. But mentally, I think Ben was on record saying something about Gradkowski. I know with Michael Vick this happened, where Ben drew up a play in San Diego and they threw the bomb. But that has also happened in reverse, of just a guy standing on the sidelines, knowing the playbook, knowing the position, and coming to your teammates and contributing something just from an intellectual standpoint of what you see on the field and what might work. And I'm sorry I don't have the exact story there, but it was something with Roethlisberger saying that, I think on one of his Tuesday shows that's on the Fan or something like that. And, that's pretty cool. It shows you the value of having players like this in your locker room, even if they've only thrown 3 passes wearing a Steelers jersey. So Bruce G coming back for one more year. I think that tides the Steelers over, so they don't have to do anything drastic as far as a quarterback search. Of course, they don't have the money to spend on somebody like a Brian Hoyer as a backup. And a lot of people just say, oh, Bruce G or Landry Jones, cut them both. They're bums. Well, what else are you going to do? You could end up with a Jimmy Clausen. And Jimmy's just one of several names that are out there. They're just Brandon Weeden, Matt Castle. These are guys that bounce around from team to team, and somebody tries to make something of them, and all they end up doing is just everything burns up in flames. So I'd be grateful. They have a great support system and great cast around them, where without Ben, they're able to win a handful of games and carry this team into the playoffs. And that's what I'm kind of excited about, at least some consistency and not somebody brand new that won't know the playbook, a la Michael Vick. I'm cool with Bruce Gradkowski being back. It's a 1-year deal. More than likely, he may not be back the following year, but it depends on how these things play out. Steelers draft a QB or find another veteran off of someone else's waiver wire. We don't know. That's for in the future. Right now, we're focused on 2016. Good deal for this team. It's very salary cap friendly. I think it also is good for the locker room, and is definitely Bruce Gradkowski is a contributor both on and off the field, whether it be in practice or in the games. Very happy to have him back in Pittsburgh, and I'm very happy the Steelers didn't go with the quarterback. That would have been even more of a wasted pick than maybe Andrew Billings. Very tough to say. Bitter pill to swallow, but that's one that I didn't think I'd be saying about a week ago, but I'll handle it. Hey, folks, it's always great chatting with you. Look forward to speaking to you again across Facebook, Twitter, even on Google+. Those of you following on the YouTube channel, look forward to talking to you again. And hopefully we'll have some more news and some more updates come up with. If not, maybe a little bit few and far in between on the podcast up until we get into some of the off-season training stuff. So just stay tuned, and I really do appreciate your support. Thanks once again. We'll talk to you soon.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.